Welcome to another lecture. Today we're going to be talking about the foundation of industrial organizational psychology, the job analysis. Just as a reminder, there's multiple ways to go through these slides. The instructions are listed here. And as always, keep track of what the readings are and also the quiz that is due. So, the job analysis. Again, we've been talking about this idea of in order to bring psychology to the workplace, we need to be able to study it through the scientific methodology. And a major part of scientific methodology is the idea of observation is the best way to know things and that there is a cause and effect. We talked about this in the last lectures, the idea of empiricism and determinism. Empiricism, the best way to know the world is through systematic and structured observation, and determinism, that there are causes and effects. There's antecedents and consequences. In other words, if you change things in the workplace, it will result in changes in the workplace. So IO psychology is focused on first being able to measure the workplace, measure people within the workplace, and measure the workplace itself, and then look for the interactions between different people in different jobs in order to be able to cause change, to go in and basically adjust the workplace to make better outcomes. And the basis for most of what IO psychology does is the job analysis. And the job analysis is simply the way we measure individual jobs. So remember that idea that work is the individual tasks that we do at a job. A job is a combination of tasks that help categorize and define it. And we're really focused on that categorization of looking at how do we measure exactly what is involved in particular jobs. So, how do you define a job? So that's the first thing, is actually going to structural definitions of how we define jobs. And I just have some quick kind of vaguely humorous examples here, but these are actually taken from a first step in job analysis. And many times one of the first steps in job analysis is to simply ask people that have the job to define them. These are particularly taken from when people were asked to sum up their job in a single sentence. And some people tried to do it very structurally, very controlled, but other people put a little bit of a spin on it. So I just want to go through these quickly and figure out and see, can you figure out what job these descriptions are describing? So read things that don't matter, then write papers saying that they do matter for points that don't matter in order to get a job doing something totally unrelated. So take for a moment, and do you have an idea what job this is? This was taken from, of course, a student. Show you innovative ways to burn money in the spirit of patriotism. So the job here is to show people innovative ways that they can burn their money in the spirit of patriotism. In this case, it's fireworks sales. Here's another one. Try to protect the good people from the bad people, only to be hated by the good and the bad people. Well, this one was taken from a police officer, and you can also tell that when you start actually doing job analyses, not only are you going to be capturing elements of what the job entails as far as tasks. So, for example, fireworks sales, show you innovative ways. So basically that implies that you have to, you're basically a salesman. You're trying to convince people to do this. However, with the police officer description, we don't have a lot about their tasks, obviously the protecting people. But there's also some elements of what the environment is like, what the emotional environment of a job is like, and those are important aspects as well. Manage waste recycling, promotion, and sales. So again, someone here has a fairly straightforward idea that they're managing, they're doing recycling, they're promoting the recycling, and they're doing sales. But what job is it? In this case, it's an antique dealer. And the final one is a little dark, but it is managing urban renewal and pest control. And this actually was taken from a job analysis of a B-52 bomber pilot. So just asking people to define their jobs is going to give us very different information from different people, and it's also often going to capture elements that we may not as be interested in. And that, again, is where the scientific method, the idea of structured observation, is important. And that's why we need a job analysis. Just asking people, what do you do? Describe your job, may give you useful information. It may not give you useful information, and it may give you useful information, but it's not the information that you're actually needing. So, an overview of job analysis. Job analysis is the process of defining a job in terms of its component tasks or duties and the knowledge and skill required to perform them. So the purpose of a job analysis broadly is to systematically define jobs. It's to categorize jobs, and it is try to come up with enough information to provide exactly what tasks are associated with that job, what duties, what's the environment of that job, and finally, to provide information for future use of what type of skills and knowledge or what type of person is needed to be able to do this job. What do you need to know? What do you need to know how to do? And what kind of person would be a good fit for this job? It's the foundation for most work in industrial organizational psychology. So once you have a job analysis, you can use that to determine how to select for the job. You can use that to help recruit for the job, promote what the job involved. It allows you to look at how you should compensate the job. It helps to organize organizations. So if we're looking at organizational development, a lot of times we're going to cluster different types of occupations or jobs based on job analysis. It also tells us what knowledge and skills are necessary. This can fuel training. It also lets us know what are the core responsibilities of the job, which can be very informative if we're doing performance appraisal. Now, a lot of that is the personnel side, the I side, but also knowing about jobs allows jobs to be redesigned. It allows you to understand the emotional aspect of a job, the stressors that are involved with the job. It may also provide information of how you would want to motivate someone that has that job, which is also very O side. It is clearly the most important building block for I side. Everything we do in personnel psychology, from performance appraisal to recruitment to selection to training, works better if you have a solid job analysis to work off of. So the framework for industrial psychology when we're looking at job analysis is that a good, complete job analysis is going to give us three main areas of information. There's going to be the actual evaluation of the job, and we're going to talk about that last, and that is to the left. Let's mainly focus on the middle one and the one to the right. So job description. The job description is used for criterion development, performance appraisal, job design, redesign, and training. What that specifically means is the job description is the act of categorizing the job. So what does the job do? What are the core responsibilities of the job? And how would you actually measure success in the job? And that's what fuels that idea of criterion development. Criterion is simply a fancy word for outcome of the job and basically performance. So designing tools or measurements to measure performance. Once you have that performance measurement, how do you actually appraise performance? What's good performance? What's bad performance? Also, is the job actually what you expect it to be? A lot of organizations that go through the process of job analysis often realize that a lot of their workers are spending a lot of time doing things that they weren't originally envisioning as a part of that job. And it can also fuel training. The far right is job specifications, selection and placement. So basically, a lot of times job specifications are almost just a laundry list of exactly what traits, what knowledge, skills, and ability is necessary to do the job as it is described. And this allows you to then test people to find out if they have those knowledge, skills, and abilities through the selection process, and then to choose the very best people for that job placement process. Finally, if you have a job description and job specifications, you can use that to categorize that job compared to other jobs in the organization. And that's job evaluation. How important is this job? How hard is it to find people with the skills necessary to do the job? And that gives you a lot of information on how to do compensation. So let's just break down some job analysis terminology. So again, what we're analyzing is the job, so the bottom of this chart, a collection of positions similar enough to one another to share a job title. We're trying to categorize things into jobs. So for instance, within a department at a university, the faculty within one program or department, like psychology, it's pretty easy to say that they all have the same job. Now, there's going to be minor differences from faculty member to faculty member on exactly how much teaching they do, how much research they do, but those jobs are very, very similar. Now, the jobs of a faculty member in the pharmacy school or the job of a faculty member in a medical school might have a very different look, enough of a different look that you would need a different job analysis to really capture what's necessary to have that particular job. Going up the chart, we start at the very top with element. An element is the smallest unit of work activity. And elements are basically, think of it as if you're looking at any activity, what is the smallest unit you can break it down to? And those would be individual behaviors. So an example of this is that if a part of your job is answering the phone, the elements of that would be the ability to pick up, actually it would start with the ability to be able to hear the ringing, to know the phone is ringing. That's the first element. The second element, the ability to pick up the headset. The third element, the ability to communicate on the phone. The third, to be able to transfer the call through entering a combination of numbers on the phone. And finally, the final element would be hanging up the phone. So elements are very small units of work activity. We're usually not very focused on elements, but we want to be aware of them. We are focused on tasks. Tasks are multiple elements combined that become an activity of work that is performed to achieve a specific objective. Every job is going to be made of a series of tasks. So, for instance, if you are an administrative assistant, one of the tasks may be answering and transferring calls on a telephone. That's not elements, that's a task. That's also a part of the job, and tasks are what we're usually trying to identify. All of the tasks that are associated with one job. Below tasks is position, comprised of tasks performed by an individual and organization. So, for instance, my job as a faculty member consists of probably thousands of elements. There are many tasks. I need to be able to answer emails. I need to be able to converse on the phone. I need to be able to create PowerPoint lectures. I need to be able to deliver lectures, create quizzes. I need to be able to create research designs. I need to mentor students. All of those tasks together become my position. So my position is unique compared to any other position in even the psychology department here at SIUE. It is the specific task performed by me, an individual, and organization. So as a part of a job analysis, we have to recognize that when you're doing a job analysis, you're not wanting to get so specific that the analysis is focused on a position. Because if we did that, we'd have to do a job analysis for every single person in an organization. We want to be able to do a job analysis that identifies the positions that are similar enough to lump together as one job, which is at the bottom of this terminology, a job. Again, a collection of positions similar enough to share a common title. So approaches to job analysis. Job analysis, generally speaking, is focused on two possible ways, and actually a third has come up over the time. So historically speaking, initially job analyses were very job-oriented. It describes the various tasks performed in a job, and it's very job-specific. So a job-oriented approach is really just creating lists of specific tasks. A worker-oriented approach examines the broad human behavior, the physical, the interpersonal, the mental factors. And there is some crossover between the two approaches, and one approach is not necessarily better than the other. So historically talking, when we were talking about the history of industrial organizational psychology, remember that the I side started first. Industrial psychology, very focused on basically helping organizations be better at performing. And that's where the job-oriented approach came out. That if you're going to categorize jobs based on simply productivity as the outcome, you want to be able to be measuring primarily just the tasks that are necessary. Through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, as we have the human resources and human relations movement, and the O side gets added to IO psychology, that's where the worker-oriented approach came from. People going, we shouldn't be focused on the task. We should be focused on what kind of person excels in this kind of job? What kind of person would like this kind of work? So it's almost more of a career counseling viewpoint. Today, almost all job analyses are the hybrid method. And this is the most recent, and it's the third way, and it's gathering information about both the work and the worker. It's a combination of job-oriented and worker-oriented approach. And most of job analyses will have a list of tasks, but they'll also have a list of human factors that are important to the job. So we're going to first talk about job-oriented approaches. So we're going to talk about some very specific methodologies we can use if we're wanting to do a job-oriented job analysis, but also recognize these methods are still used today in the hybrid approach. So the first thing is a systematic way to identify the tasks involved in a job. And this is referred to as a task inventory approach. The idea here is that subject matter experts, often referred to in IO psychology as SMEs or SMEs, generate all the tasks. So if you were doing a task inventory of being a student in this class, the first thing you would do is you would have every student in this class literally sit down and list every task that's associated with being a student for this task. So that is our first group of subject matter experts. But we wouldn't be just using students. We would also want to gather more information. We would also want task statements to be coming from me, the person that's actually creating the class, but we also want to get task statements from other people that teach online classes and other people that teach classes in general. What are the tasks involved with being a good student? Now, the students that are actually currently in the class are what we refer to as incumbents. They're people that occupy the job of interest, and we always want to make sure that we include incumbents in a task inventory approach, and pretty much any of the approaches we talk about as far as conducting a job analysis. But it's important to not just use incumbents, because incumbents are only looking at it from their own viewpoint. And there may be tasks that incumbents do not do as a part of their role that they should be doing. So the task statements are then rated by incumbents on performance, importance, criticality, relative time spent on the job performing the task. So once a pool of these task statements are generated by all the subject matter experts, a list is created of those actual tasks, and it's given back to the incumbents, the people that have the job, and they're asked to rate how often do you do this and how important is it to you performing your job. So this is just an example of a task inventory approach after the tasks have already been generated. So we have task statements. In this case, it's task statements about being a professor. So if this was given back to me, first thing I would do is I would rate, is this done at all on a job, yes or no? And then I would rate how important is that task to my job, from not important at all to extremely important. And finally, relative to other tasks on my job, how much time do I spend on this particular task? Everyone from much less time to much more time. And again, this is a way to get systematic information of what are the tasks that are involved with the job, but also how important are they. So another job-oriented technique is the functional job analysis, or FJA. It's a very highly structured approach developed by a particular IO psychologist, Sidney Fine. And the data are obtained about what tasks a worker does and how those tasks are performed. Job-relevant tasks are then rated on dimensions of data, people, or things to understand the extent to these three dimensions interact. So what does all that mean? This is basically an understanding that if you're just generating tasks, one of the problems with generating tasks when you're looking at doing a job analysis is it does have a tendency to start to become very specific to positions more than jobs. So every faculty member is probably going to have a little bit of disagreement of exactly what tasks their job involves. So the idea behind a functional job analysis is to try to take that task-oriented approach and make it more usable and more broad. So the idea here is you're still using subject matter experts, you're still going through a very precise process of generating tasks, but you're also then categorizing all the tasks generated on three dimensions. Does the task involve dealing with data and ideas? Do the tasks involve dealing with people and social interactions? Or do the tasks involve actually creating physical objects, fixing objects, dealing with things? By doing this, you get a rating of that job, of just how much that job is involved with data, people, and things, which allows you to start to kind of look at similar jobs more easily. Also, if you have 4 or 5 job analyses that seem to be very similar ratios of data, people, and things, it makes an argument that you might be able to collapse those into one job instead of multiple job analyses that are more focused on positions. So again, the functional job analysis, we're looking at data, the extent to which the job requires handling of information, ideas, and facts. People, the extent to which the job requires using interpersonal resources, understanding, courtesy, mentoring, basically social interaction. And things, the extent to which the job requires using physical resources, strength, speed, and coordination, but also creating actual objects. Okay, so that's 2 broad ways to gather the tasks together. Using these tasks to generate job analyses, one of the struggles is, again, that when you actually go through a task-centered approach, in other words, a job-oriented technique to create a job analysis, it's hard to keep it from being very, very specific. Another tool that's been used in the past to try to address this problem was the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, or DOT. It was developed by the Department of Labor in the 1930s, and the idea was to use functional job analysis, basically, again, dividing jobs and organizing jobs based on how much time is spent with data, people, and things to develop a list of all of the possible jobs in the United States at that time. So it was a tool then that would match people with jobs, but it was also a tool that was meant to keep people from having to continuously do job analyses. They could simply go to the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, find the job they are interested in, and then find out what does that job entail. It included narrative descriptions of the tasks, duties, and working conditions of approximately 12,000 jobs. And each occupational code included, basically every job had an occupational code, a lead brief statement describing the job, a list of each task element, and many other additional factors that might be involved with the job. And it was an attempt to kind of basically create a hierarchy of jobs in the workplace. So here's just a quick example of a DOT description. This is for a faculty member. So again, we have our lead statement, conducts college or university courses for undergraduate or graduate students. So basically, the attempt to put the job into a sentence. The title, the industry, the occupational code, and then we have task elements, and then we have may elements. The task elements are what every faculty member very likely has to do. These are core job requirements. The may items are additional factors that they may do in their job. Now, we don't use the DOT anymore. We've switched from that to ONET. So ONET, Occupational Information Network, is actually a website, and the link here is live. You can also just Google search for ONET and go to it. And its purpose is to identify key components of modern occupations. Now, the problem with the DOT was purely a task-focused, job-focused job analysis tool. So, and also 12,000 different occupations listed. So people were finding it very hard to make much use out of this particular tool. ONET went through the whole process of job analysis, but also using a hybrid method. So ONET includes very job-focused, task-focused elements, but it also includes worker-focused elements like what's the stress level of the job, what kind of personalities work better in this job. The ONET has 950 occupations listed, and again, its purpose is to allow people to quickly look up different jobs and get a snapshot of what that job entails. So it's based on information gathered in a variety of ways using a hybrid approach, and it was basically every job in ONET went through a job analysis process of using subject matter experts to generate both the task-focused but also the worker-focused items that were then rated by further subject matter experts. It's highly accessible, and it's a searchable online database. And I strongly encourage you, not just for this class, but also for your own knowledge, to take a look at ONET, because as you go on the job market, it is a very useful tool to kind of get an idea of what exactly do jobs entail. ONET is a very useful resource for beginning job analyses in organizations. The problem with ONET is that it's almost too broad. So if you, for example, find a job that you've had in the past, go to ONET and look it up and see how much of the ONET description describes what you did on that job, but also note what ONET says that you should have been doing that you didn't do or wasn't involved with your job, and you'll probably also find a few things that were involved with your job that aren't mentioned by ONET. So ONET has become a very good starting point for doing accurate job analyses in the modern world. So the ONET model is based on a very hybrid approach. So the job-oriented approach or task-oriented approach is the bottom here. And it looks at occupational requirements, occupational characteristics, and occupational specific information. So what are the tasks, tools, and technology necessary to do the job? What is the labor market information and occupational outlook? In other words, how is the job itself doing? Is it a growth field? Is it currently in recession? And what are the requirements of someone to be able to do this job? What kind of work activities and organizational contexts are occurring? At the same time, it provides worker-oriented information, such as what are the abilities, occupational interests, and work styles of the people that have this job, what knowledge, skills, and abilities or work requirements are there, and also what experience requirements. And finally, there's both information about how it crosses across occupations, but also how it's very specific to certain occupations. The criticism of these job-oriented approaches, and ONET is more of a hybrid approach, but it's still built off of a history of this job-oriented approach, is it often too narrowly focuses on the tasks for a particular job. It may miss similarities in a job due to high levels of task specificity. A good example of this is that if you did a purely task-focused analysis of two different roofers, people putting roofs on houses. If one of them was working at a pretty low-tech company, so they didn't have advanced technology, they were basically using ladders, hammers, nails, and that was about it. The tasks generated from that job analysis would all be about, physical ability to lift shingles, ability to maintain balance on a ladder, being able to work on angles, being able to drive nails with a hammer. If we did the exact same task-oriented job analysis of someone that worked for a high-tech company that had basically a hydraulic jack truck that could bring all the shingles up online right to where they were working at the top of the roof, we're using hydraulic nail guns, the tasks generated there would be very different. Those two jobs would probably end up looking very different when they're actually very similar.